For you today.
We absolutely do. I have an upcoming interview that I'm looking forward to. We'll be chatting with a mom. I don't want to give away too much. So, moms watching out there, imagine at 28 weeks pregnant, you're being told that your child in your womb might not survive. And dads. How scared you might be. Well, we're going to hear more about the Reimers' story in just a few moments.
And they're from one of my favorite cities in Canada, Winnipeg. Love the folks in Manitoba and Winnipeg. I lived there for 8 years.
I was going to say, it's nice to hear you spreading the love a little.
Yeah.
Because usually it's always about Edmonton.
Edmonton, but I love this part of the world too. Southern Ontario. Love it, ladies and gentlemen.
We love to share some good news and some interesting topics that come up in the news. And I found this interesting. Our producer had found this great story about how toy companies are working to make more inclusivity when it comes to toys and when they're designing toys. So, for instance, Barbie, so we all know the Barbie dolls, have launched a new line of dolls aimed to encouraging girls to consider careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as you can see there. Yeah, Barbie's moving forward as, moving on, but beyond Ken, which is great to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to I've got a grandson, but looking forward to the granddaughters, and we'll have inclusive
no pressure
Barbies.
there.
No pressure.
Also, Lego has started a line, actually in 2014, of female scientist figures, and they got a lot of heat earlier on because they had created a line of pink toys, thinking girls only liked pink toys or pink Lego pieces. And so they're featuring paleontologists and astronomers and chemists who are all women, which is really cool. And then we have, in 2016, Lego started a wheelchair-using character as well. So, again, I love to see how these toy companies are moving into reality.
Right, and the Ken and Barbie, I mean, it put a lot of pressure on girls to look like Barbie and Ken.
Did you notice, though, they didn't show the full figure of these new Barbies? I wonder if they still have the tiny waist and the...
Yeah, which is...
We're moving slowly but surely. We're going to get there.
Even the toy companies are moving ahead. All right, hey, we got Robbie Simons. He joins us a little bit later, but right now we're heading to Birch Narrow, Saskatchewan to visit with a woman who is leading her remote community. Our associate producer for First People's Voice, Crystal Lavallee, brings us this wonderful story.
I left home when I was 13 years old. My friends were doing their thing and I wanted to join. So I decided on my own that I was going to leave home and I was ready for a family. Little did I know I wasn't. I was only 13 years old, about to have a baby. I thought I was in love. I had my first hit. I got slapped. And it was a surprise, but after that, it was nothing. It was a paradise because I got spoiled for a few days. And then it started again. I got hit again over and over and over. I had decided to leave him and I started drinking. I started drinking really lots and I met another man.
I was stressed out because I'm the mother. And I kind of, one day my husband said, Rose, let's just leave it. Let's just give it to the Lord. Because God can take care of everything.
So Jada came into this world, my daughter. And we continued with the drinking. And one day, he came home and brought a case of beer, and we were sitting there, and my daughter was in her room. We were just sitting there having a beer, and he decided that we were going to be his prisoners for the night. He locked us in the bedroom, hammered the window shut. He put me against the couch. He dragged me around by the hair while my daughter was there. I kept comforting her and telling her, it's going to be okay. Just go along with what he says. It's going to be okay.
A lot of times it came to the point where she just about gets killed or tragedy in life. It was really hard on me because she's the only girl I have. It took a long time for me to believe that, that God would change it.
So February 28, 2013, I decided I was going to take my own life. And I took a bunch of pills. The ambulance came for me and I went to La Loche Hospital. Nobody knew this happened. And the next morning I woke up First thing I seen was my daughter's face. She was standing there beside me. I couldn't stop. I just cried. And I promised her, I said I wouldn't, this is the last time I'm gonna drink. She didn't believe me. We got home, and I remember opening the door, there was cans all over the place. It didn't even look like a home. I started slowly. I started picking up the cans, cleaned up my house. I went outside, I burned all the beer boxes there was out there. That night, after everything was cleaned, I was trying to sleep, I couldn't. I fell down on my knees, and I couldn't stop crying. And I said, God, please, I need you now. I know I've talked to you many times, and I've promised you many times, but this time I need you. And then I felt a sense of relief, like I was tired. I never slept so good in a long time. Hey, my baby.
I can see a lot of difference in Rebecca, a lot of difference, and I can see that the Lord is working in her life.
I've built a life to where my daughter can be proud of me, to where my parents can look at me and be proud of me, who I am, who I became.
He shall give his angels charge over you.
Today, when I look at my girl, she's really bright, and she's very gung-ho about what she does. She believes in herself, and she cares a lot about people here in Turner Lake.
I'm working with my community right now to help our people, because I've faced many struggles like they have in their lives. There's those days when I can't handle things, and He gives me the strength. I never knew God as much as I've known Him now, because I didn't believe that He'd love me and that there was this kind of love.
What an emotional story, and you know, we have many of those kinds of stories and interviews on this program, and every time I know it touches me deeply. It does stir up the emotions, you know, when you hear what Rebecca had to go through, being locked in a room, treated in a subhuman way. She didn't deserve that, led to alcohol problems, but she got free because in her most desperate time she said, God, I need you, and He was there. And if you're going through something like that, maybe you're being abused and you just happen to come across this program today, you don't even know it's called 100 Huntley Street, that's not the important thing. What is important is we want to direct you to a God that cares. He will intervene in your situation when you call out to Him. We have amazing people standing by at 1-866-273-4444. That's our prayer line. They're not professionals, but they can get you help. I just want to take a moment even at this time just to pray. Father, I pray for those that are suffering abuse. You see the pain that they're going through. You see the difficulty. They have many cases, like Rebecca, children. Father, I pray that you would just give them the strength to get out of these relationships and talk to somebody, including one of our prayer partners, that can direct them to professional help so they can get the healing and begin the road to recovery. And if they don't know you, Lord, I pray, like Rebecca, they will call out to you and say, God, I need you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And we want to remind those watching that, you know, telling the stories of First Peoples is so important to us here at 100 Huntley Street. Orange Shirt Day is coming up September 30th. And this is a day where we are just reminded to support the residential school reconciliation, to create awareness of individual, family, and community intergenerational impacts of the residential school situation, and to remind everybody that every child matters. We never want to see what happened during the residential school situation to ever happen again. And so this is a way of bringing reconciliation.
And even with the church, because the church, of course, was the forerunner of the whole residential system. And, you know, we're repenting of that and we're bringing healing. And part of that is presenting these stories. Well, coming up next, you know, what in life matters? You know, we're looking around, we're saying, you know, what should I be doing and how should I be doing it? Well, we have Vancouver pastor and author Ken Shigematsu to explain.
Staying spiritually healthy takes a little bit of discipline and work, and Pastor Ken Shigematsu has been helping us with spiritual practices. Ken, today we're going to discuss the practice of vocation. Let's define it first. What is vocation?
Vocation, very simply put, is your call from God. It includes not just your job, but the person you're called to be.
Okay, and that's the person you're called to be as a mom, as a caregiver, as a retiree, whatever it may be. God has a calling on who we are and what we do physically.
Right.
Okay, so how do I connect with God's purpose for my calling, my vocation?
Yeah, this is really important because our society tends to define success by how much money we make, the size of our house, how well known we are. But God will define your success by whether you fulfilled your calling, your vocation. And so it's really important, as I write about in the book, to surrender open-handed to God and say, God, what is it that you want me to do? And as you prayerfully pursue that, God will guide you. It may not be in a dramatic way, but God will speak to you. And when I get to the next world, God is not going to ask me, why weren't you Billy Graham? Or why weren't you Mother Teresa? Or why weren't you Lorna Dueck of 100 Huntley Street? He'll simply ask me, why weren't you Ken? As Duke Ellington, the jazz musician, said, it's better to be a number one yourself than a number two somebody else.
You actually challenge us in this book to imagine our death. Why?
You know, as we imagine our death, it clarifies what's really important. As I was writing this book, my own father was dying and in fact died, so I was thinking about his life. My dad grew up in a very impoverished Japan that was decimated by the war. It had no money, couldn't afford to buy books, got them from the library, studied hard, eventually went to an Ivy League school in the United States, became a broadcaster for the BBC in England, met with the Queen, had tea with her, became a CBC broadcaster here. But as he was dying, those, quote, resume virtues weren't important to me. What really mattered were his eulogy virtues, his character, his immense kindness, his outstanding integrity, his quiet but very real love for God and his family and closest friends. And so it struck me that what we do is really important. What we contribute matters, but what matters even more is the person that we become. Do we reflect the love and the compassion of Jesus?
Well, thank you for telling us that about your dad. You've written a lot of good examples in this book, Survival Guide for the Soul, about how we live out these spiritual practices that keep us closely connected to the most important thing, and that is our relationship with God. Pastor Ken Shigematsu, thank you so much, and I want to encourage you to get a copy of Survival Guide for the Soul. Here's how.
I admit I've had a divided heart, and I've struggled between the tension of worldly success and spiritual fulfillment. But I've learned that what keeps us from flourishing in our spiritual lives is the neglect of our inner life of the soul. And I want to show you a fresh perspective in my new book, Survival Guide for the Soul. Through my stories and a wide range of sources, I demonstrate how the gospel lifts this pressure off of our shoulders, restores our desires, and reorders our spiritual lives. I share spiritual practices that will help you attune to God's presence and discover a liberating and countercultural definition of true greatness. Call 100 Huntley Street today with your best ministry gift, and you'll receive a copy of my book, 1-800-265-3100. I pray that this book changes your life.
Picture this. You are 28 weeks pregnant and you're told your unborn child might not survive. And if he does, he would have a genetic syndrome which would affect his quality of life. Grace, that was your story. It must have been a scary time.
It was very scary.
Tell me about that day, if you can go back, and hearing that news. Tell me, what was that like?
It was shock. It was very scary. You know, at first when we heard it, we're like, well, you know, at first we heard that Matthew was missing limbs. And so we're like, well, that's okay, we'll get prosthetics. You know, we'll help him. But then the one doctor there said, well, that's not the issue is that he might not live. And so, or if he would, then there would be a lot of disability involved, and possibly a mental disability too. And so, yeah, it was just, we just wanted him to live. It didn't matter about the missing limbs. Like, we just wanted to have a baby.
Yeah. And one of the doctors had mentioned the A word, abortion, and had said that if you had known earlier, that could have been a possibility.
Yeah, and as soon as he had said that, Don's brother was actually in the room with us because he was a resident at the time at the hospital. But we just both said, well, that's not an option. Like, that was never an option for us. So, like, I just wanted my baby. I didn't believe in abortion, so.
Why was that not an option for you?
Well, I believe that God has designed life and has a plan for each one of us. And so
even knowing that your child might be born with a lot of disabilities and challenges, this was not an option for you?
No, not at all. I would just, we would just deal with whatever child God gave us.
So you prayed?
Oh yeah, we prayed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me why? Why choose to do that?
Well, for one thing, we sort of both felt very alone. Nobody else we knew had dealt with anything like this. It was just Dawn and I. And I also felt like my spirit was crushed. In Psalms, it talks about that God is close to you when your spirit is crushed. And that's just how I felt. I felt really low. And so really for us, the only way to look was up. And that was to pray and also to read our Bibles and to see what God had to say and what he could help us with dealing with this.
So take me to that day that your little Matthew was born.
Okay.
What was that like when you saw your baby?
Yeah, well, that day, I remember my water broke at home, and all the things we'd been told that he might not live or whatever, I just remember I was happy to finally go into labor. You know, I had been waiting from 28 weeks on to find out what this was going to be, and I was just happy that I was going to have my baby. And so we went in, and I ended up having a C-section, and so Matthew was whisked away to the intensive care doctor to assess him, and so I didn't see him right away, but 20 minutes later I did, and I just saw his beautiful face, and I just knew by looking in his face that he had no mental disability. I just knew it. I could see that bright spirit in him. So that was really, I was just so happy that he made it through the delivery and that he was there.
And there was a nurse that kind of was watching how you and Dawn were treating your child, and she said something to you. What did she say?
Yeah, she said she'd been nursing for about 20 years and she'd never seen anyone react this way. And so she was...
React what way?
I guess just that we just loved him the way he was, and we were just so happy that he was there. Yeah.
And so as Matthew got older, tell us about some of the challenges that Matthew has had and what he was born with.
Okay. Well, Matthew was born, he's a quadruple amputee. So he was born missing bones in both of his legs and in his arms. And
what are the challenges maybe that Matthew faces?
Yeah, the challenges that he faced, also the things that we were concerned about when he was younger was, number one, a big concern was, would he walk? Number two, would he be able to feed himself? Yeah, just anything really. Would he ever, and I never even thought he'd ever be able to do something like drive a car or, live on his own or whatever.
Yeah.
But the main things were feeding himself, going to the washroom, walking on his own. Those were the challenges.
And what has he shown you over these years?
Well, basically, the first 2 years, he showed us a lot.
Yeah.
He started feeding himself at the age of 2. At the age of 3, he started walking. Yeah, and all the other stuff all came along. And so he's just, every time he has done something new, it was just such a celebration for us and just a huge event.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to meet Matthew and hear how determined he is to live his life to the fullest. Stay with us.
Still to come on 100 Huntley Street.
I see these people driving and I'm like, well, I want to do that. And I've met a couple people who are like amputees, multiple amputees who drive. So I wanted to figure out how to do that.
There's a lot of studies that have shown that there is a real benefit, a health benefit, an emotional benefit, a sociological benefit to being in God's creation. But sadly, it's rare these days.
Well, we're now joined by Matthew. Hey, Matthew, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Yep, it's awesome to be here.
Now, as you heard your mom share the story of the challenges that she had, How does it make you feel? I know you've heard the story many times. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's almost surreal. Like, some of the stuff I actually hadn't heard. It's just, I feel like I learn something new every day. I can't believe what my parents went through and just the will they had just to power through it. It's awesome to hear. It makes me feel honored to have such great parents. So.
Yeah, parents that love you deeply.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your life and maybe challenges that you have and how you've overcome it. It sounds like your mom says that you haven't allowed anything to stop you.
No, I don't know, I guess one step at a time, right? Like when I was younger, of course, there were challenges like that. And as I get older, I feel like one of the big challenges is just keeping up with people, right? But what you have to do is you just have to recognize that they're not trying to, they're not trying to leave you out of things or anything like that. They're just doing their best to include you. And you just gotta live life, as you said earlier. It's just, yeah, take part in as much as you can. Like, I have a YouTube channel. I like to go swimming, like to play outside, all kinds of stuff. Just take part in everything your friends want to do.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what I like to do. So.
And I love that. I love that you're just wanting to live life fully and you're not allowing maybe challenges that you have to stop you from doing that. Tell me about this YouTube channel, because we're watching and we'll probably see some images as we chat of you driving.
Oh, yeah.
And so you found a way around this to make sure that you, like any 19-year-old, you want to get your license, you want to be out on the road independently.
Yeah.
So tell me how this all came about.
Well, it started a few years ago. I was just going to youth group one night, and it kind of dawned on me that I was 16. I was like seeing people driving around to youth.
It dawned on you that you're 16. Oh yeah, I'm 16,
Yeah.
I should be driving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, I see these people driving, and I'm like, well, I want to do that. And I've met a couple people who are like amputees, multiple amputees who drive. So I wanted to figure out how to do that. So what we did is we went down to, it's rehabilitation, like at Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg.
Okay.
We went down there and we just looked into how I might drive. We saw some videos of other amputees driving. We showed them some of the people we know and how they go about driving. And yeah, step by step, we slowly figured it out, found different modifications that worked. And ultimately, I was driving about a year and a half later.
Wow. And Grace, the heart, I'm just thinking as a mom.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was very exciting.
Yeah.
But it was also a little bit scary too. But I think for any parent, it would be scary when your child starts driving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't even want to think about the day that my children say, Mom, can I have the keys to the car? I also want to hear about your passion to share Jesus with others. You talk about that just in your school, in your university, just being a part of wanting to share a good story, and that is the story of Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, I'm part of a group on my University of Winnipeg. I go to the University of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
On the campus there, I'm part of a group called Power to Change. And basically, we move into a gospel conversation, first asking students just of their idea on maybe how we can change the world if it's possible, and whether there's a spiritual dimension to change. And then we slowly go into a gospel conversation. And I know it's tough being a university student, and there's so many different ideas flying around. And yeah, I just want to show them the light, right? That like, I face challenges, but I see Jesus every day in my life, and I know that they have challenges too, and that they can definitely power through those and get to know Jesus for themselves.
And I think there's something powerful about you sharing the message of Jesus, Matthew, because, you know, people could say you've had challenges. Why would you believe that there's a God that loves you? What would be your answer to that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, my answer would be that just like every step of the way, there's been so many challenges I've gone through, and just God's been there. Just hearing my mom say like how I was born, like it's totally a God thing how they were able to go through with that much courage and just be able to just stick in his word and not give up having faith. And I mean, it's clear there's a God, just all the things I've been able to experience, the fact that I've been able to drive or just have the privilege to do all these things. I had a surgery when I was younger to fix my club foot so that I'd be able to walk. And one story is I was having a surgery because this got infected, and they had to just take a piece of my bone off here, and I was lying there on the operating table, and they were trying to put me to sleep with a needle there with an IV, but they kept, I don't know, my veins are tough to find, so they weren't able to get it, and eventually they wanted to move down to this foot here that I had surgery on when I was little, and I got very nervous about that, so I just prayed, God, just please, I want to give them one more chance here to put it in my hand. They were pretty insistent on the foot, but I'm like, God, just please intervene right now. I pray that you would just help me to just be able to get through this, and that you would, if it's in your will, just to be able to have the IV work in my arm, because I'm really scared. And that really reinforced my faith, because it was like after 5 different tries, all of a sudden, once I prayed, it just happened, just like that, snap of the fingers. That was unbelievable. So yeah, just life experiences, things like that. Yeah.
Grace, I'm thinking about a mom watching at home that maybe has just gotten news maybe similar to yours, that their child might be born with some disabilities, or they might have a child right now that has some challenges. What would you say to that mom?
I would say to them, number one, I don't think the doctors always know what exactly the outcome is going to be until that baby is born. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's an educated guess, like they can sort of say what they think, but oftentimes it's surprising how the outcome is. Mm-hmm. And number two is that if you trust in God, He will help you through any situation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when I think how scared I was before Matthew was born, and you know, I didn't even know if I would be able to handle it or not. But God was right there with us, and He helped us all the way through. And just to trust in God and just let Him help you and guide you and give you wisdom, and to know what kind of decisions to make, you know, with the health care and whatnot. And He will. If you trust in God, He will help you.
Well said. Well, thank you both for being here today.
Thanks.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
God's love is like a fire. When it ignites and when it spreads, it can transform anyone.
I called 100 Huntley Street the prayer line, and that was a real turning point in my salvation.
We serve a God who can take the ashes, the broken pieces of our life, and He can make something beautiful.
So I said, God, if you're this real, I will do anything that you want me to do.
God's love story can inspire anyone to make a difference in the lives of people around the world.
We are very sure, we are very optimistic about our future, because we know we will plant, we will have water to drink.
You become influential by setting a new pace. The gospel is timeless.
Every single person has a story, but we're all part of God's greater story, which is the greatest story of all.
You know, often we do these programs and we got great people behind the scenes that get the guests, but there's a theme that develops. So earlier we heard from Rebecca, and she overcame horrible abuse. Matthew said he had physical challenges. He overcame that. Talking to the Reimer family, we're sitting in the back of the studio and we're getting all teary-eyed, but it was very, very powerful. You know, and that's one of the things that we want to help people to understand, Maggie, is that you can overcome a lot of things with the help of the Lord.
Absolutely, and just a reminder that God loves you. And we'd love for you to tell us your story. Tell us about how you encountered Jesus. We'd love to hear it. Go to 100huntley.com, click on the link there, and tell us more.
And a former FBI agent tomorrow. See you then.
Bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.